Notwithstanding the disturbing findings of new studies in peer-reviewed journals, His Majesty's government is still determined to booster you up the wazoo, and His Majesty's court eunuchs in the media, such as Philip Schofield, are still eager to sign you up for it. But is the increasingly dysfunctional NHS even competent to do that? In Southampton last week, 36 children between 5 and 11 years old were given not the children's dose of the vaccine, but the adult shot, or what the BBC is benignly calling a, quote, higher than normal dose. Oh, just higher than normal, nothing to see here. This is what we used to call the wrong dose, or indeed, when it comes to certain substances, an overdose. Dr. Ros Jones is a paediatrician. What do you make of this, Ros?
Well, it won't be the first time mistakes have been made. It's very worrying because obviously these children didn't need even the correct so-called dose. Children do not need this vaccine. As far as I'd understood, the non-urgent offer that was made last February, starting in April, had actually stopped on the 1st of September, and it wasn't going to be given to any more children until they were 11 and a half years old. But then quietly it's come back in again. So suddenly at half term this week, there were pop-up clinics all over the place, and children invited to attend. Now, those clinics won't have been running regularly for anything other than adult services. So presumably they may not have even had the children's dose in the building. And who realised, because the parents got phoned the next day, as I understood it, they weren't even aware at the time they'd given the wrong dose. Now, I've just, because, you know, you've asked me to come on tonight, I quickly looked back at the trial data, and not surprisingly, they have these phase 1, 2, 3 trials. So in phase 1, they tested out different dosage schedules on a small number of children. They had the 30 microgram, which is the adult dose, or nanogram, the adult dose. They also had a 20 and they had a 10. And not surprisingly, the side effects were worse with each higher dose. So they decided that for the phase 3, which is the proper clinical trials, they would use only the 10 nanogram dose. So these children have been given not twice the dose they should have been, but 3 times the dose they should have been.
That's very interesting, Ros. You know, people think when they sign up for this that someone like you is going to be giving them the old jabber, or a nurse, a trained professional. In fact, it's people whom they hire on the internet. I was just looking at an ad today. You get £12 an hour, and you have to, the qualification is that you've passed your GCSEs. Is that a sufficiently high standard for the patient to give informed consent to?
Well, no. And I mean, there's 2 different parts of the process, as I understand it. I have a friend who came back from retirement and was giving vaccines in the vaccination hub. And he was an anaesthetist. I'm sure he knew how to give an intramuscular injection. But when they started rolling it down to children, and I said to him something about, so what are you telling them about myocarditis? He said, what do you mean? So he'd been given no information whatsoever. And then I said, well, when you're getting consent, do you explain to them that actually the risk of myocarditis is much higher for teenagers than it would be for a 75-year-old? He said, well, I didn't know that. But anyway, I don't get consent, he said. I only give the injections. So the consent is done by somebody at the reception desk, who equally may not be qualified. But you've come in having, you know, presumably received an invite, which you might have then looked online to read the bump if you wanted to, or there might have been a leaflet, you know, with the invitation, I suppose. But you might just turn up having read nothing at all. And the fact that you've arrived is enough for the vaccine centre to think you've had the information that is required for informed consent. So I think it's just a complete abrogation of all ethical practice, particularly given that this drug is still not fully licensed.
No, you're quite right. And as I said, in the case of these, I mean, vaccinator is now a profession now. But as I said, it's a profession with a very low entry level. You just have to have the GCSEs and know how to find a vein, which distressingly large numbers of the population are able to do. Thank you very much, Ros.